Hey everyone, Rick here, and folks, welcome to my top 10 games of 2022. All right, let's kick this thing off with some disclosures. First of all, I apologize for the length of the video. I love watching people's top 10 lists all the time, and whenever I see it crack an hour, I'm like, really? But then I started just recording my segments. Now I'm recording this after I've recorded all of my individual game explanations and reviews, and it's well over an hour. I was trying to keep myself to a 5-minute max per game. I don't think I did that once. I just was rambling on and on. Additionally, please feel free to completely skip this. The timestamps in the description. I think I'm even going to put a pinned comment with timestamps. One of my biggest pet peeves with these kind of lists is it just seems like people feel like, they're acting like they have the latest spoilers from the newest Star Wars movie or something, where they want to keep everything so secretive, maybe to make you watch the whole video. I find myself, clicking on the scroll bar of the video, and I'll just look at the thumbnail as it goes along. Okay, number 10 was this, 9 was this, 8 was this, 7 was this. So kudos to all of you who do top 10 lists and just put the list in the description. I mean, it makes it so nice. The other thing is when they say, all right, my number 10 is this worker placement game that has this theme, and I really enjoyed this. Just please say the name, especially those who do put the timestamps without a name, and then I'll click on their number 10, and you just really want to hear the name. That's the first thing you want to hear. So anyway, pet peeves out of the way. I think that's all the disclosure. So I'm going to talk about some games that did not make the list only because I haven't played them. I own them but haven't played them. Then I have 5 honorable mentions, and then we'll do the top 10. And I have an individual segment, a mini review of each, 5 to 8 minutes long, I think, for each. But again, please feel free to just get in, get out, check the list. If you see a game you like, click on the timestamp and it'll take you right to my thoughts on the game. So a few games that did not make the list that I own but I haven't played. Creature Comforts. I'm really looking forward to this one. I picked this up a while ago. It has fantastic wooden components, at least this copy. I didn't back a Kickstarter or anything, just a local shop picked it up. But I love the theme. I love the components. From the gameplay reviews I've seen online, it looks fantastic. Plays up to 5, which is actually kind of a nice deal. Don't know how well it plays at 5, but that is Creature Comforts. Next is Ark Nova. Now this is, 2021 release officially, but it was very, very difficult for those of us in the United States to get until 2022. But even so, I didn't even get this till Christmas of 2022. So everything's punched, everything is sleeved. I just now need to get it played. But I know that this has made a lot of people's lists. So I wanted to call that out. The other game is Skyrim, the adventure game. This is another game I just got for Christmas. I haven't even sleeved this one yet. I punched it all out, but my God, there's like 1,000 cards in here, and I am a sleever, so yes, I will be having to get it sleeved before I play it. Other games, I just grabbed a couple that are 2022 releases. I have played them. They're fun for what they are, but they didn't make the list or the honorable mentions. Yahtzee Frenzy, believe it or not. This is like Roll For It, but real time. So you're rolling dice. You can keep re-rolling until you have the combination that matches a card, and then you slap the card and you get the points. But there's also special player powers in this as well. There's cards with abilities on them. So if you're a Yahtzee fan, if you're a Roll For It fan, and you don't mind a little real-time craziness, especially for a family, that's not a bad game. A Christmas present I got this year was Space Mountain, and I've now played this a couple times, and it has some interesting mechanisms, to say the least. It has a kind of a cool dice tower where you're rolling the dice down. It tells you where you can move, but where it falls a little bit flat for me is the end game. Especially you have these ships that you're flying around, and you're trying to explore space and flip over these tokens and get a bunch of same symbols to match your mission cards you're trying to collect, which is all well and good, but again, you're moving on a pre-programmed route that these dice are going to tell you where you can go. And when you only need one symbol left, even if you know where that symbol is, it's now just who can roll the right combination to get your ship there. So, fun idea, neat components. There are some 3D space stations in here. I'd leave them off. Your post-game pick of you and your friends around the table with the game, put those out there as part of the aesthetic. But when you're playing the game, don't bother, because trying to get the ships to pass through these 3D standy things is just a pain. So that was just a couple of games that didn't make the list. But now we are moving on to honorable mentions. So I have 5 of those. If I was doing a top, I could have done a top 20 or more this year, but we're just going to stick with a top 10. But these are the next 5 if I was doing a top 15. Honorable mentions, let's go ahead and take a look at those. All right, folks, here are the honorable mentions in no particular order. If I was doing a top 15 of 2022, these would be 15 through 11. All right, folks, hopefully you enjoyed those honorable mentions. Those are, and as I was ready to make this list a while ago, one of the reasons it took so long for me to put this out was because new games kept becoming available, especially for those of us here in the United States. So I had like a top 10 list, and I'm pretty sure almost, if not all of those 5 were on it. But then I got more games, and I was playing more games, and the list changed. And I know it's going to keep changing, especially with those games that I just showed off that I own but haven't played. But you got to draw the line somewhere, right? Otherwise, it's going to be 2024 before we get the 2022 list out. So let's cut it off here. Here's top 10. Here's number 10. Oh my god, this game is freaking gigantic. This is Foundations of Rome. Let's take a closer look at my number 10 of 2022. All right, folks, here we are with Foundations of Rome, and the table presence of the box alone is enough to send shivers down your spine. We have this incredible storage solution for which I think it's on TikTok, of actually sticking the Foundations of Rome box in a Kallax cube. It fits almost perfectly, like it was designed. Maybe it was to fit in one, but it fits all the player trays. This can play up to 5. I think the 5th player is an expansion, and then there's also a bunch of monuments. I believe those are an expansion as well. But here we are, set up for a mock 2-player game, because I just wanted to show you all of what you can do in Foundations of Rome and how it looks on the table, partially set up as if we were playing through middle of, I don't know what this would be, late round 1. So, Foundations of Rome, why is it on my top 10 of 2022, apart from the fact that you are placing out these gorgeous miniatures? Are you kidding me? Miniature buildings of, Roman architecture. There are 3 different kinds of buildings, which is a clever mechanism in this game. You have some that'll increase your population, some that'll increase the amount of money you earn, and others will give you end of round, end of game points based on the other types of buildings that they're adjacent to. You have these lot ownership tokens that you'll be placing out. You get 6 lots to start the game, and so you'll look through those 6 and you'll say, okay, G2, we've got G2 there already filled in, and you'll place your starting ownership. But then you're going to want to collect additional deeds. These all cost money, and as you buy one, the rest slide down, and there are 3 eras in the game, so you'll constantly refill from the same era until that deck is done, and then all these cards have been purchased. You'll do end of era scoring, and then it's move on to round 2, then era 3, and that's when the game ends. On the score track, which is dual layered, which I absolutely love, you're keeping track of population as well as victory points. You are balancing several things in this game. First of all, on your turn, which as the nice little player card shows, you can purchase a deed by paying coins. I wish I had gotten, because I did not back this Kickstarter either. And once the Kickstarter was over, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get my hands on this game. I saw so many reviewers reviewing it. I'm like, why? Why are they like reviewing it when no one's going to be able to get it? Well, actually, it was easier to get after the Kickstarter than I thought it was going to be. Though I wish I would have gotten some of those metal coins. But anyway, so you can purchase an additional lot from the deed board. You can build on the lots that you own. So say, and there are buildings as small as 1 square. So you are always going to be able to find somewhere to stick a building, but where you place those buildings is going to be very important. But there are 1s, there's 2s, there's angled 3s, straightaway 3s, there are long 4s or square 4s, and then these light gray buildings all are just 1s or 2s. Why are you placing certain buildings in certain areas? Well, for example, just running through some of these icons, for example, this building scores 1 point for every other building that surrounds it. So you're going to want to stick it somewhere where it's going to be surrounded by other buildings. In this case, it would be 1, 2, 3 points, and that's points generated at the end of every round. This one says 1 point per 2 population points it's adjacent to. Oh my gosh, what if I put it here? That would be 6 points, because 6 population plus 6 population is 12, cut in half is 6 points every round, that if you had that building there. And that is taking into account your opponents. And you may be wondering why some green, because all the different players are different colors. And so yes, these light gray buildings take into account your own buildings, but also those of your opponent. The other thing you can do, apart from building buildings, is upgrading buildings you already own. So let's say I had, well, what's a good example? What would be a good example? I'm going to stick a 1 building here, and let's say we built this population building here later. Well, now these 2 population buildings are 12 population. I happen to have a building over here, or did I build it already, that says I get 1 point for every population it's adjacent to. I'm going to upgrade this building, since I own the adjacent lot, to this. And now that's going to be 12 points for me. This comes back to my board. This token comes back to me as well. The way you can upgrade the buildings later in the game can really, for lack of a better word, screw somebody out of so many points. Let's say that someone had that building there because I had an opponent potentially had this building here. So it looked like I was going to be getting 10 population. I'm going to get 10 victory points for those 10 population. Well, what if they did something sneaky like this? You can never upgrade a building to a building of the same size or lesser size, but they could absolutely do something like this, where this is a 3 size building. They own those 2 lots here. They're going to upgrade this into this 4 length money generating building. They still retain the lot that prior building was leaked over to on that side, but now it's this. And so this building that was getting me 10 points is only getting me 6 now. Still pretty good, but by upgrading that later in the game, they have absolutely hosed my building here. That's just one of the many things that you can do in this game. You are battling against your opponents for positioning, for where you're building your light gray buildings and all your other buildings, and the look, the table presence when you have Rome fully built with all the buildings out there is second to none. And the ease, the simplicity of this is what you do. This is it. These are the rules right here. These 3 possible actions: buy a deed, build or upgrade a building, or collect income, which is always $5, plus you add up all the dollars you have out on the board, and that's how you'll acquire more money, and that's it. So the simplicity and speed of the gameplay, coupled with the way it looks and the tactics on this board, make this an absolute winner for me. That is Foundations of Rome. And let's get back to the rest of the list. And I mean, you can't go wrong with those components, right? But when you add in how fun the gameplay is, yes, it could all be flat tiles, but I mean, come on. That is part of the reason that this is a shelf staple for me. Every play has been fantastic. That was number 10, Foundations of Rome. Number 9. This is one of my most recent pickups, and why the list kept shaking up. It is Atiwa. I think I probably not pronouncing that correctly. From Uwe Rosenberg, one of my favorite designers, designer of Agricola, For the longest time, my number one game of all time. It was the first game that brought me into the modern designer board game hobby. I keep looking over at it right now. I was playing, sorry, Monopoly, Risk, maybe a little Magic the Gathering and other things until I found Board Game Geek in 2009. The number one game at the time was Agricola. Anyway, we're not talking about Agricola. We are talking about Atiwa, or Atiwa. And it is a game about fruit bats in Ghana. Very unique theme. How does it play? What do I think? Well, we know what I think. It's my number 9 of the year. Let's take a look. All right, folks, here it is, Atiwa from Uwe Rosenberg, one of my favorite designers, and I know I say that all the time, but that is the designer of Agricola. For the longest time, my favorite game of all time. It was number 1. It's still at definitely top 10, if not still top 5 for me. It was the first modern designer board game I ever played. I know, imagine breaking in with that, but I was hooked after my first play. But here we go with his latest and greatest. And folks, there are so many clever mechanisms in this game. Now, I don't know how many games that I have played where you have a player board with components on them. And as you take the components off, you are going to get benefits at some point during your turn. Not necessarily immediately in this game, but at some point. So Clans of Caledonia kind of has that. Heroes of Dominaria has that. I love the cause and effect that takes place in Atiwa. First of all, the theme is fantastic. It is this super cool theme about fruit bats and the environment. And there's this entire insert that will talk about all of that. So what's going on with the rainforest and things in Ghana and the fruit bats and all this stuff and how this theme ties into the board game, which is, first of all, fantastic, but also the components are great. So you have great wooden pieces, and like in a lot of Uwe games, or just, lookout games in general, but you have the wooden goats, wooden wild animals, the wooden bats. You're going to be seeing the wooden fruit bats all the time. They are fantastic as well. And then the cardboard components even are super thick. So for the trees, these are really thick counters. And there is a difference because here is, and this looks super thin in comparison. I don't know how well I can do this, but if you can, and of course, if we get a focus there, how it's almost half the thickness of the trees. The tree thickness is double, and this, even though this is a pollution tile, which we'll talk about that in a second, how cool that mechanic is as well, this is still normal thickness. This is a perfectly fine thickness of a tile, but these tree tokens are super thick. And what else was thick? These family tokens are super thick. But anyways, so the components are great, the artwork is great. I love that there are they're not Easter eggs because they're part of the game. Like, this is the 2-player side of this extension board, and you know that because there's 2 people there. Just like on the 3 or 4-player side, there will be 3 or 4 people there to denote what side that is. So anyway, I get, I love little details like that. So, in the actual game itself, what are you doing? Well, it's worker placement. So you're going to place a worker out. Everyone has 3 workers, and you'll be placing them out and getting whatever the action is. A lot of these are going to look familiar to you. Pay a gold for 2 goats. Get a tree with a fruit on it and a goat. Get some bats, a gold, 2 bats here, or a wild boar. Get a bunch of trees, because in this game, the end game scoring points are going to give you points for where you end up on a lot of these tracks, leftover gold, how many trained families you have, because training the families in the way of the fruit bats is highly important. But you also don't want them to starve. There's a feeding your people situation here, and it gets dicey. The more families you have, the more food you're going to have to spend, and so you're going to be slaughtering your poor goats and feeding them fruit. And if you have families that haven't been trained in the way of the fruit bat, you can even slaughter the bats. At a different, threshold of food per thing that you kill. But in a lot of the games as well, things are going to grow, things are going to fruit, things are going to breed. But this is where this whole mechanic comes in. So you look at this from top down, depending on what's out on your board, during the phase where you're looking at this, okay, top row is going to give me another tree. So I would take the next tree off, and that would let me know how much more fruit that I get. And then you would go down to the fruit row and take that fruit off. And then that'll reveal the number of bats that you'll get. So the chains to the chain, like it all chains together so brilliantly, but that isn't all. So the theme and mechanics are so well intertwined here, and I don't want to talk at length like a full-on review, but this is the untrained side of the family token. This is the trained side, so they know the benefit of the fruit bat. But if they are untrained, then during the income phase, they are going to go mining for gold. And mining means they're going to reach into this bag of pollution tiles, and this is for each untrained family you have, and you're going to pull those out. And then you flip them over. And if they found any gold in the river, you're going to get that gold. But either way, you are then going to have to pollute your area. And it goes in order of top row, furthest left you can place on each of those. And if it does end up covering up something, that something is removed and put back. Whenever you have to remove something, you put it back. So you could get some serious pollution going on in those situations. So yeah, there are a lot of fantastic and thematic mechanics in this game. Some of the other mechanics in the game are how you're getting these additional tiles. You only start with one at the beginning of the game. You're going to have to spend different amounts of gold and trees in order to clear areas and build up different areas, which are worth points at the end of the game. There are some other terrain tiles. Those are location tiles. The terrain tiles up here aren't worth points. Sometimes they're worth very few points or no points or minus points, but there'll be a lot of areas that you can get, and not only don't you don't have to pay for them, but you also get something for taking those as well. And there, in addition to all the different actions you can take, worker placement areas you can take, some of which get better the more of these nature icons you have, and these terrain tiles sometimes will give you those nature icons, so like take a gold for every nature icon you have. But this sliding, these action tiles slide, so like in round 5, this was round 5, then round 6 we slide that over, and what that does is it unlocks, and it kind of creates new combos of what you'll get when you go there, unlocks new combos, but also tells you what's going to breed at the end of that turn. So at the end of round 6, if you had 6 or more families, they would breed a new family. 3 or more wild animals, they'd breed another wild animal. And just one goat would give you another goat. So there are just a fantastic array of actions. The mechanics are so smooth. It lasts 7 rounds, 3 actions a round. I have fallen in love, and this was super highly anticipated for me anyway. I mean, I knew it, Uwe Rosenberg, it was gonna probably be good anyways, but the theme, the components, the mechanics, yeah, folks, it all fits so nicely together, and that is why I love Atiwa. Another on my top 10 of 2022. Let's get back to the rest of the list. All right, folks, hopefully you found that as interesting as I did. But now it's time to move on to number 8, and that is Hamlet. I don't know what the deal is with the Founders Deluxe Edition I have. If all copies out there are just simply that edition, that just means like the first printing of the game or whatever. Number 8 is Hamlet. For these reasons I'm about to explain now. Okay, my friends, here we are with Hamlet, and let me explain why this has made my top 10 of 2022. Apart from the obvious, number 1, it is gorgeous. I mean, look at this box cover art. That is freaking beautiful, and one of the few box covers that I would strongly consider wanting a print of to hang on my wall. I would hang that on my wall so fast. But not only that, even the tile art of this village, as it says, it's a village building game. And I have a mock-up 2-player layout here just to show off the components and whatnot. as I'm doing for basically all of these top 10 games. I have the church out here fully constructed, though I'll be honest, when I first played it, I considered using the church. I went from that to using the flat church tiles to not, and then the next game, not even using those. Just because the flat church makes everything so much easier to see. For post-game pictures, when I post it on social media, I'll throw the little church on there. But otherwise, just having these tokens to denote what has been built is honestly enough for me. But either way, the components of this game are fantastic. They are printed pieces. So you have the donkeys, you have the little villagers. All of the villagers are different, believe it or not. You also have roads, which could be paths or bridges, depending on if they are combining forest spaces or combining mountain spaces. You have all of these different goods, which are also printed, white for refined goods and black for mundane goods, because that's right. If you're the first to build a building that is fantastic at refining a good, for example, grain into flour, you get this little token, and now all the flour you generate is high quality. So there's all of these little milestones, and also end of game awards, which I absolutely love. So you have little ribbons for all of those. Now, this one is the Founders Deluxe Edition. I don't know what the differences are between this and like a retail copy, but this one does have metal coins for 1s and 5s, which are super nice. This bag is great. This copy did come with these little chits for randomization. Now, I understand the bag is large enough so that you could stick all of the tiles into the bag and shuffle them up. Of course, you just start with the entry-level tiles in the bag and draw those. And then once you have built one of the refineries, you'll add the tiles of that refinery stack in. And then when you build another refinery, you'll add those in. So it's almost like a tech tree where you're building more sophisticated buildings that require those refined goods. But I definitely use these because obviously all of the buildings, most of them are different shapes. You have bizarre shapes, you have teardrop shapes, diamond shapes, hexagonal shapes. So if someone's digging in the bag and they're thinking, well, I really would like a pond, I'm going to feel around for hexagonal shape. Now, obviously, you can argue, well, then just don't play with people who would do that. But just to avoid grabbing a piece that you know what shape it is, these randomization chits are, I won't play without them. Let's just put it that way. But overall, the gameplay is so fast. Your villagers will be on the board. And I love the fact that you can go anywhere. Basically, as you're expanding this village, you're creating more action opportunities. You can, in the beginning of the game, go to any of these production style tiles and refill the production as if you were chopping wood, and then you get some money for doing that. And there's a few of those out there. But as you build more and more, you're going to be building the dairy farm. So if you come over here, now you're going to need a grain, the grain that you potentially produced over there, in order to make this, which I assume is milk. And then you get a reward for that. Now, in addition to placing a worker somewhere and activating that building, you have to have, this is a game of logistics and road networking, because you'll have to be able to transport that grain all the way over here. Can you do it? Well, what you're going to need to do that are the donkeys. That's where the donkeys come in. So now I have a grain here. All the production goods can move one space for free, as long as it's along a road, which can either be printed on the tiles or created by you. So this grain would scoot over here for free. Then the donkey knocks it over to here where I am producing that milk. And again, if I was the person, I guess it's herder. So if I was the herder, then now, instead of making that mundane milk, I would be making refined milk. And that doubles the points and money you get when this eventually becomes spent. But anyway, I don't want to go into all the rules. Just a quick overview of how you can do so many different things, building these buildings, going to the market. And of course, the main thing is contributing to the building of this church, because once all of the spots are full, and this is just a 2-player setup, you flip this over, there's more spots to fill in a 3 or 4-player game. Once all those spots are full, finish the round, and then it is time for final scoring. But the logistics is actually really the interesting part. Building these roads, getting your donkeys in places so that you can transport goods from one tile to another, because eventually, as big as this map gets, you're going to have a ways to go. If something you need is way over there and it needs to come all the way over here, you're going to need multiple donkeys and able to do that. But then there's all these different landscape tiles that'll give you end of game scoring points. Like this one is 1 point per segment connected to forests. So like this is a segment. There's actually multiple segments even on a side. So this is a segment, that's a segment, that's a segment, and those are 2 segments. So that one would be worth 5 points at the end of the game. Either way, I could ramble on and on and on, but fantastic components, if a bit small. These are super tiny, but I haven't really had too much of a struggle, knocking things over or anything. Fantastic components, smooth and fun gameplay, an absolute blast. That is Hamlet. Let's get back to the rest of the list. That was another game with gorgeous components, but fun gameplay. And as I say in a lot of these, are the actions that you're doing during the course of play fun to do. It doesn't feel like a lot of filler, like you're doing something just to do it. And in Hamlet, you're doing a lot of things for a big payoff, but even the things themselves are fun to do. But speaking of gorgeous components, let's move on to number 7. That is Flamecraft. Holy cow. A lot of these have been Kickstarted. I'm pretty sure none of these games whatsoever on this list I've actually kickstarted. So if any of these have been kickstarted or game founded or any of the crowdfunding services, just know that what you're looking at are games that I purchased myself and outside of that crowdfunding. So that is the same with Flamecraft, though I picked up the deluxe edition with some fantastic components. Let's take a look at my number 7. All right, my friends, and here we are with Flamecraft. I don't want to say an unexpected hit for me, because just looking at the components and the graphic design of this game, this should have been a clear-cut favorite. But I'll be honest, I didn't know much about it. I did not back the Kickstarter. I eventually got a deluxe copy and have fallen in love. Of course, as many people have, mostly at first glance due to that artwork, that adorable dragon artwork. But these components, the theme of the dragons being adorable, just even reverberates through these components, these wooden tokens of the 6 different resource types: potions and meat and iron and leaves and bread and diamonds or jewels. So, in Flamecraft, what you're going to be doing is some of my favorite things to do in games, which includes fulfilling contracts, placing and getting actions, getting a whole bunch of bonuses, potentially comboing together as you are picking up new dragons, placing dragons in these various shops. So this idea of all these different shops really appeals to me and really stands out to me. There are other games like Lords of Waterdeep. When you put out a new building, everyone gets to use that building potentially. In this game, you are putting out more spots to place workers, aka your dragons, but they are constantly being improved, because when you go and here, these wonderful player aids are fantastic. They have the different kinds of dragon abilities that all 6 dragons have different abilities, and every dragon, like every crystal dragon, always has that same ability. And then there is endgame scoring and in-game scoring, separate dragons as well. We'll get into that in a second. But when you visit a shop, good Lord. A shop, you're either going to gather or enchant, and it takes you right through the list. So you will gain the goods. When you first place a dragon at the start of a game in one of these shops, aka critical roles, I mean, the puns are endless in this game, which is another fantastic thing. You're going to get as many resources as you see icons. When you go to a shop and you can place a dragon there, as long as it has an icon matching an icon on one of the other spaces, and then you'll get something. In this case, you would get a gold, or in that case, you'd get a fancy dragon, which again, those are going to be the end game or in-game scoring opportunities. But if I put flambe here, I'd take that gold. And now whenever someone else comes here in the future, they're going to be getting 2 bread, but also a meat. So that is just one example of how those shops improve. The other way they improve is by enchanting them, and that's where this contract fulfillment comes into play. So instead of gathering, you can enchant. So wherever your dragon is placed, and you have to choose a different shop every turn, obviously, when you move your dragon, you're going to move them to a shop that matches the icon of the enchantment that you want to do. It's very simple. Just cash in the goods and then take the enchantment. Pop it in back of the shop. And now, again, in the future, when someone goes there, they're going to get all of those things. So enchanting shops makes them better. Placing dragons makes them better. When you place a dragon and after you do whatever it is you want to do, whether you're enchanting or you're gathering goods, you're going to be able to activate one or more of the dragons that are there. So let's say, oh, that's not good. Let's put them there. And this is completely wrong. You can't do this because obviously there's no leaf icon there. But let's say that could potentially actually happen. Believe it or not, there's a way to swap dragons around. But let's say we did something like this and we went there. In this case, if we were gathering goods, we would get 3 bread, a meat, and a leaf. Or let's say we enchanted. We were the ones who just put that enchantment there. Well, let's back up. If we gathered goods, we gathered all of those goods, and then we can choose one of these dragons to use their fire up ability. So you can gift a good to another player to gain $2 if you use Dandelion's ability. You can place a dragon from your hand in town in one of the other shop spots to gain a benefit there potentially. Or you can draw a new dragon. So Pan will let you take a new dragon from the park, and this park area is where you can draw new dragons from. But that's only one. If you gather goods, you can only activate one of them. But if I enchanted it, now I get to activate all 3 of these things. And that's where the combos really come in, because that is pretty sweet. Now, you noticed a lot of these shops, these starter shops all have the same rewards for placing dragons. There are so many more shops. We'll look at that in just a second, because look at this map. This mat is like this fabric mat that rolls out, and it is so long because there can be, in some player counts, up to 14 shops? In lower player counts, 12, but still 12 different shops, because when a shop is completely full of dragons, a new shop comes out from the stack. So you might have something like this, Wishing Well. Now when you come here, instead of getting resources, you're going to get $3. And then when you place dragons, all of those dragons had a starter dragon in them. These new shops won't. And so there's 3 different places to place dragons now. If you place here, you get a bread. I'm sorry, this spot can either hold a bread or a potion dragon, and you get 3 points, or another fancy dragon or more 3 points. And then these are also going to have abilities. These more advanced shops, when you place them out, are going to have different abilities. Whenever you see that icon, it means it can be any type of dragon. So this one says, when you use this shop's ability, which is something that you can do if you're gathering resources, you place a dragon in town, and if that was the 3rd dragon in a shop, you gain 4 victory points. So if it was a situation like this, and I use this ability to gather goods, and I had another leaf dragon to place, I could place a leaf dragon there, and it fills a shop, and that ability gives me 4 points. This one says I can flip up to 3 coins, heads, gain 2 hearts, or tails, lose the coin. coin. So it's a bit of a risk there. But all these shops have different effects, different abilities, will get you different things. It is a fantastic mix of action selection, contract fulfillment, in-game and end-game scoring possibilities. I know this one's running along too. Whenever you see a moon on these artisan dragons, it's an end game scoring opportunity. 2 hearts, 2 victory points if you have 3 iron at the end of the game, or in +3 if you have the most iron at the end of the game. A sun is an in-game scoring opportunity. You can just cash this in whenever you actually do this, which is pay 5 potions to gain 3 hearts and 2 coins. So if you had kind of a potion generating engine going with maybe some of these different combos, and you had excess amount of potions and potions just weren't coming up on these contract cards, then you can absolutely do something like that with Nightbright. These dragons have different names, they have different art, they are absolutely gorgeous, and that's the fancy dragon specifically. But yeah, again, the components are fantastic. The gameplay is easy, simple, fun. Every action that you do most of the time is going to be a fun thing to do. Like I've said in some of my other videos on this list, these coins are amazing. Again, this is the deluxe edition, so the components are just absolutely fantastic. But all right, folks, that is it. That is my overly long explanation of Flamecraft and why I love it so much, why it made top 10 of 2022 for me, and let's get back to the list. All right, now my number 6 is easily probably going to work its way up in the future with more plays. And I think you'll understand why when I reveal, because this is another heavy game, both in terms of weight, but also complexity, and that is Weather Machine from Vital Lacerda, the designer of one of my top favorite games of all time. It's actually my favorite game of all time, or number 2. It's in a constant battle with Praga Kaput Regni for my favorite game of all time, and that's CO2 Second Chance. Specifically, Second Chance, few rules tweaks over the original. The original was also one of my favorite games of all time, but specifically, even to narrow it down a little bit more, the competitive version, the semi-co-op version. Not the co-op. I don't care about CO2 Second Chance co-op. It is strictly competitive for me. That is my number 1 or number 2 game of all time. But I digress again, because we're talking about Weather Machine. Same designer, similarities here or there. Now, some people reference The Gallerist or some other of Vital's games where they feel there's some, associations to some of the mechanisms. I never hear anyone mention CO2, and I feel like there's a bunch of stuff and I think I explain it in the clip, talking about Weather Machine. Super heavy, super fun. Let's take a peek. All right, folks, here is Weather Machine from Vital Lacerda, which is the designer of one of my top 2 games of all time, CO2 Second Chance. When I watch reviews on this game, people do compare it to other Lacerdas, but I really never hear any comparisons to CO2, but I do see a few here and there, such as wanting to cooperate on branches of the Weather Machine, because if especially in like a 2-player game where there's a neutral bot in one of these branches and you're like, okay, well, sun's coming up, I'm gonna get over here, what about you, what are you thinking? And is the other person gonna join you over there? Or maybe the sun tile's not worth a whole lot and they're like, I have other better things to do. So it's kind of like in CO2 where you are cooperating somewhat semi-co-op, putting power plants on the board to reduce carbon emissions, but also this whole 3 bots in the government branch to complete a branch of the government's machine reminds me of the summit tiles in CO2 where you need 3 scientists to complete a summit. Anyway, there were just a bunch of little things that I kept thinking about CO2. Why do I love Weather Machine so much, and why is it top 10 of the year for me? Because of the payoff when big moves happen. Now, with Weather Machine, there is a lot going on. There's going to be a bunch of smaller tasks that you do where eventually it's going to pay off big time. So, for example, a very boring move is just taking a single action in the weather machine branch itself, because all you'll do here is place one of your bots in the machine. You gain a funding point, but you gain a funding point, but you do lose a voucher. You do gain potentially one or more vouchers for going there, but all you do is place a bot. That's that action in a nutshell. The payoff happens when the assistant gets to that branch, and if there was a tile, it'll trigger, and you get all kinds of points depending on how many bots you had there. It's fantastic when somehow you can chain things together and completely load up one of these branches of the weather machine with all your own bots, especially if it's a big late game pointer. 6 points then for 3 bots that you had on that branch of the weather machine. So setting things up like that is fun. Building the prototypes are fun. Getting bots and machine components necessary to build a prototype is a big payoff. There are so many steps that you have to go through in order to even do that. For example, you're going to need the bots, you're going to need the chemicals, you're going to need the machine parts. You are going to have previously published a paper in that type of weather, which means you will have had to have gotten 3 of these research tokens, 1 from each branch, or you can substitute one with an award tile. I'm not going to get into all that, or even a citation token. I'm not going to get into all that, but there are other ways to substitute, so you don't necessarily have to have gotten a research token from all 3 branches. But that's just one of the parts of doing one of these prototypes. You'll have to have published the paper, had a breakthrough marker, be able to pay all the costs. And so all of these smaller things will lead to big payoff when you are spending the gears. And if you have a lot of your own bots there, and if you have the gears there on too, this could potentially be up to 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 points in a single go. Even more if the branch at the time costs multiple gears, and that might happen because either the government has ran its machine or the weather machine itself runs. So there's a lot going on. But one of my favorite branches is the government branch, because this is all getting things. And I've probably said this earlier in the list. One of the big qualifications for me of enjoying a game is, are actions fun to do? The government branch is super fun to do, because whether you're putting a bot and getting a subsidy tile for later, getting a research token there, getting these investment tiles, the subsidy tokens, you can use them later, and some of these give you extra actions. This is what I was talking about, chaining things together. I know I don't want to go over 5 minutes like per game, because this is going to be an hour-long video or more. Just know I could talk about this game for even longer. There's so many great playthroughs on YouTube. Go check those out, because I definitely watched them several times before I was ready to jump in playing Weather Machine myself, but it is so worth it. All of the different actions, even as boring as just placing a bot in the weather machine, eventually are going to pay off. Eventually it's going to run. You're going to get a research token. You're going to publish a paper. You're going to have gathered the bots, chemicals, and machine parts in order to place them in the R&D field over here and do a breakthrough and get these award tokens. I didn't even talk about that. That's how you get the award tokens. They're wilds for your research board. And hopefully if you can get 3 research tokens, you will get the Nobel Prize, which has eluded me through my plays so far. One other last thing, the components are fantastic. You see everybody's printed. These little bots are freaking awesome with the little clocks on them, little clockwork bots. These are big chunky wooden pieces. Even these tiles are so thick. These are as thick as wooden tiles, essentially. The tiles are great. Dual layer player boards. I got these Metal Gears. Some people aren't the biggest fan because they're hard to tell the difference between this color and this color, sometimes in the light. Normally I alleviate that by just looking at the spokes. So if I need this type of gear. I just looked, there's 4 spokes in the middle, whereas this one's a whole wagon wheel of spokes. But so I do actually really like the metal gears as well. But anyways, I've been talking about this one too much. Folks, I love it. Weather Machine, definitely consider checking it out if you are into heavy, crunchy Euros. All right, folks, it is top 5 of the year. And it's hard for me to rank games because, and here's the other thing, I've done top videos before. And I will say this first. Let me just say, okay, I know I ramble on and on. This is the best. 2022 was my favorite year of gaming since 2018. 2018 for me was huge. Crown of Amara, I know, came out that year. Kalimala, I believe, came out that year. And those are 2 of my absolute favorite. 2018 was a huge year. 2022 may have met that or exceeded that for me. But it's so hard for me to rank games because, just the day of the week, I may feel differently, especially with how good all of these are. And again, I'm not like a I can't even speak properly, a proficient reviewer, of board games. I don't put out a whole lot of board gaming content. So any of these games you're seeing were not sent to me for review, because what I'm getting at is in prior review top list videos that I've done, people will ask, well, how many games have you realistically played? What's your pool of, good to bad games of the year? Again, since I'm buying these all myself, chances are I'm going to love them because I am not going to buy something sight unseen. I've watched so many reviews and playthroughs before I even thought about adding some of these to the cart. So these were purchased by me after review, unless they were a gift. Some of them are gifts. But they were probably on my Board Game Geek wish list. So, and if they're on there, that means that I've also looked them up as well. But anyway, all that to say that, yes, I'm a huge fan of these games. I'm not going to buy duds typically. Next, speaking of Kalimala 2018, the designer of Kalimala, my number 5, we're in the top 5 now, folks, and that's Zapotec from Fabio Lopiano. This is a fantastic game set in the Zapotec Empire, Mesoamerica, Central America, and the mechanics in this game, you're only taking 5 turns. Can you believe that? 5 turns. But the ramp up as you move from that first turn where you're not getting a whole lot to the second, third, fourth, the buildup is huge to that 5th turn. Let's take a look at my number 5. All right, folks, here we go with Zapotec from one of my favorite designers, Fabio Lopiano, designer of Kalimala, top 10 game of all time for me. And one of the big things that made that an all-time great was the smoothness of the actions, the fast-paced scoring. In this case, the entire game is pretty quick. Now, later game turns can take longer because of all of the additional options that open up for you, but still, you're only taking 5 turns in a game, which is kind of mind-blowing with how deep the strategy ends up being in this one. So just a brief rundown. On your turn, you are going to be playing one of the cards from your hand. The card will have a resource at the top, either wood, stone, or brick, and you're going to be looking at your board. Now, in the beginning of the game, you're not going to have these buildings here. Instead, you are going to choose one of those resources, and you get everything in that row or column. At the beginning of the game, it's blank, so you'll just get a brick, or you'll just get a wood. But as the game goes on, as you're building these buildings, now you choose, well, which column, which row do I want? What am I going to need to build the next building that I want to build? So cornfields cost a wood and a stone. Villages cost a wood and a brick. Temples cost a stone and a brick. This game is so clever. You have 3 different regions. You have 3 different terrain types, forest, hills, and plains. And then you have the 3 different building types. So this combination of 3s really boils down to some interesting features. And of course, 3 different resources. And then also 3 different upgraded resources, which you're going to be spending on things like making purchases from the market. There are, again, 3 different levels of purchases that you can make to either just get resources or convert resources into other resources or give you incredible player powers. This sacrifice track, you're going to be spending priests and corn to move up it, endgame bonuses for who's further ahead, but also you get a lot of great bonuses on the track. And then you're also building pyramids. This is endgame scoring potential, where if you're the first person to lay a piece of a pyramid down, you get to choose an endgame criteria for scoring. And the more pieces that are on that pyramid, especially of your own color, are going to make that more valuable for you. Completed pyramids also score incredible amounts of points. And in order to be able to place one of your tokens on one of these ritual cards during the game, you need to have a pyramid piece in place to even be able to do that. And you spend a priest in order to be able to put your disc on one of those ritual cards. So endgame scoring is your place on the sacrifice track, ritual endgame scoring points based on those criterias, and then the pyramid endgame scoring. But during the course of the game, you're getting points as well. Points are just going to be face value right there on that track, but also at the end of each of your turns, you're going to look at the card that's on this special place on the board, and you're going to score that card as well. And this ends up being incredibly interesting because when you are playing these cards to determine what resource you're going to be getting, which column, which row you're going to be activating, it also has a picture in the middle of the card, which tells you your restrictions for building. So if I played this card, I could only build cornfields that turn. Or this card, I could only build in the forest region. I could build any building type in any region, but only in the forest terrain. Or this card, I could only build in the green region, but it could be any terrain, any building type. And then at the bottom of these cards is a number. The player who plays the card with the lowest number gets to go first. And sometimes you want to go first for certain things, like being first up the sacrifice track, because even in a lot of games, when you place your disc on top, it means that, you know, you're ahead on that track. But no, in this game, the player who got there first scores points. So in this case, purple got the full 9 points for being further on the track. But sometimes you want to be later in turn order. Why? Because when you are playing your card, you are then going to pick up a new card from the display and keep your current card with you. The next player, let's say in a 2-player game, they will then choose one of the 2 remaining cards, and that last card becomes the scoring criteria for the next round. So the person later in turn order actually gets to choose what will score in that next round. So obviously they're going to try to pick something that really helps them out and maybe not so much their opponent. So there is a lot going on for only 5 turns, but it is fun. It is elegant. I know elegant's an overused term, but the rules are elegant. It is a lot of fun. It's a blast. Like I say all the time, are turns fun? Is what you're doing in your turn fun? Well, apart from the first round when all you're getting is a single resource, after that, yes, you activate a row, a column, you're getting all sorts of things, and then the options of what you want to spend it on really open up. So yes, it's an absolute blast. That's Zapotec, and that is why it is on my top 10 of 2022. All right, and it is now a kind of a who's who of my favorite designers, because we've already seen a Vital Lacerda game, we've seen a Fabio Lopiano game. Now let's talk about one of my other favorite designers of all time. And we talked about one of his games earlier, and I'm doing already what I said I wasn't going to do, where I go on and on without actually revealing the game. But that is Woodcraft by Vladimir Suchy, designer of Praga Kaput Regni, one of my favorite, if not my favorite game of all time. So then when I started taking a peek at Woodcraft, I was like, oh my gosh, that action wheel, I'm having flashbacks. Dice manipulation, action wheel with all kinds of crazy chaining combos and bonuses. Let's take a look. This is my number 4 of the year, and it may not even be the last time we see this person on my list. Let's take a closer look at Woodcraft. All right, here we go with Woodcraft. Every time I play this, I'm enjoying it more and more. And forgive the puns, but I'm telling you, folks, where there's a wheel, there's a way. Trust the wheel. It's almost like in Star Wars. I can hear Obi-Wan telling me, Rick, trust the wheel. Because when you think you are in a jam, 9 times out of 10, I have been able to look at the wheel and get what I need using these lantern tokens, which allow you to take an action on the wheel, taking whatever the bonuses are. Let's say this tile was here, and I know I'm just going right off the deep end as if anyone knows what I'm talking about. This is your action selection wheel. Now, this is from Vladimir Suchy, one of my favorite designers, because I have loved Praga Kaput Regni, and there's another Suchy design on this list as well, possibly spoilerish. But in Praga, there's also an action selection wheel where you're going to take an action off the wheel, do the action, and also get bonuses on the wheel. Some reviewers have claimed they like this wheel better. I'm not there yet. The wheel in Praga gives you a bonus no matter where you are. There are even, in this case, depending where you are on the wheel, there may not be any bonuses at all. So for example, if I took this action here, no bonuses there, no bonuses on this part of the inner part of the wheel. However, and another thing is, something they do in Woodcraft that's not in Praga is, as I was mentioning, these lanterns. So if I did not want to take this action, let's say I wanted to take this upgrade my workshop action, which has no bonuses here, no bonuses there, but I really needed a yellow or green die, some money, maybe some scrap wood. I can spend a lantern to take this action, getting these bonuses, but pretend that this action tile was any other action. And that flexibility is awesome. That is something that's not in Praga. But then when I think about it, is this something that I prefer? I know it's kind of an interesting question because I almost like the tightness of Praga, where these are your actions, here's the rewards. Some of them actually have a cost, but make the best out of the situation, the tightness of the situation. Whereas here, it's a little more loosey-goosey. You can work the wheel to act in your favor, as long as, of course, you have the lanterns. Now, also, like in Praga, there's a mechanism where you can take an extra action on your turn. In this case, it's spending 3 lanterns. In Praga, it was spending 2 windows. I know the resources in Praga, it was stone, gold, windows, and eggs. Whereas here, it's scrap wood, glue, saw blades, lanterns, blueberries, and of course, all the wood. But at the heart of Woodcraft, you are manipulating these dice. Oh my gosh, this was so close. Final turn. Look how close I was to completing this. I just needed to get another cut that into 2. I was going to glue these 2 together. When you glue, and I'm not going to go into all the mechanisms, but if you glue 2 different colors of wood together, you get victory points. In fact, this player got extra victory points whenever they did that. But I was so close. I just needed one more, and I can't actually remember if I think I still had this glue tile available. I flipped everything back over at the end of the game. But I just needed one more glue action and one more cut action. I had already used the 2 saw blades. Sorry for the glare. Anyway, I'm not going to go into everything. But this is a lot of fun. And again, I harp on this all the time. Is taking actions in a game fun? That's going to make it scream up the list for me. And Woodcraft has that in spades. I'm a little bit shocked that Woodcraft is weighted higher on Board Game Geek, where in Woodcraft, for the most part, you are attempting to complete orders by manipulating dice to match what's on the order, and also potentially some accessories. This one needs 2 glue. This one needs a saw blade. But that is really the focus, completing those orders, moving up on these tracks for income of points, income of blueberries, which is currency. And then this is a track I love. This track tells you at the end of the game how many points each of your completed orders is going to be worth. So kind of your fate, your destiny's in your hand. Now you do get a lot of upgrades. You can get additional dice where you can plant them and grow them as trees. You can get additional saw blades, glue, and splicing abilities. There's this whole... I still haven't had much luck with this, I'll be honest. The whole tools mechanic, I don't want to say it feels tacked on because there are some great bonuses if you can make this work. I really haven't focused much on that, mostly because a lot of the time, many of the orders that come up just haven't been having the tools on them. But we also ran into a situation where it was hard to get prestige or reputation points as well. But again, the focus is taking these actions that are going to allow you to accumulate dice and accessories, upgrade your workshop, manipulate the dice to complete these orders and gain points. And that seems pretty well focused, whereas in Praga you have the hunger wall you're building, the cathedral you're building, the town you're building, your own player aid, you're also upgrading the actions on it. Then you have gold tracks, stone tracks, both mine tracks do things, university track, another track. I mean, in Praga, it almost feels like there's 5 times as much to look at and focus as in Woodcraft. So that's, again, why... If you're looking at the weight ranking on Woodcraft on Board Game Geek, I don't know if it's really that... I mean, there's a lot of crunch here, to be sure, but more crunch than Praga, really? That does surprise me quite a bit. Another thing, though, here are these helpers that you can hire, and they give you some great things. This last turn was amazing. When they hired this player, they got some amazing stuff off the wheel. They installed it here. That allowed them to trigger all of these production things from their other workers. They were able to use its ability that turn, in addition to all the stuff that they got, to really pull out a decent victory here. But it was just amazing. As always, in these kind of games, which are so much fun. And again, every action, well, maybe not every action, but most actions are going to chain combos together and do amazing fun things. And that's why I absolutely love Woodcraft and why it is definitely top 10 of 2022 material for me. So that'll do it, folks. And let's move on to the next entry on the list. All right, folks. And this one kind of came out of nowhere for me. My number 3 of 2022 is Endless Winter Paleo Americans. This one, again, I did not back the Kickstarter. This was after the Kickstarter when I started seeing reviews and video playthroughs, and I was like, number 1, I love the look of that game. Number 2, I'm loving what I'm seeing. This is something that I will now explain, and let's talk about why this is my number 3 of 2022. And here we are, folks, with Endless Winter, which is, first of all, a gorgeous production. I love the dual-layer player boards. I love the artwork on the tiles, the cards, the boards, everything. The miniature sculpts are fantastic. The printing on some of the wooden pieces is stellar. And this is not the deluxe edition. I got this from my friendly local game store. I don't know what the distribution is for certain games these days, especially ones that were on Kickstarter, what the different versions are. I am so far behind on that, but throw all that out of the window. Endless Winter is a fun game. And I've been on record in the past not the biggest fan of, believe it or not, deck building. But what makes this not only a fun deck builder for me, but just a fun game in general, why it would make my top 10 of 2022, and also just of all time, spoiler for whenever I post that video, is the fact that in a lot of cases, when you are getting cards, they are coming into your hand. So for example, you have the 5 tribe cards here, which you can spend tools and labor to get, and you could get up to all 5 of them. They all have to be different using this specific action here, but those cards come right into your hand. So that is and you can't use them for the labor that turn, but then you'll be able to use them immediately next turn. You don't need to worry about your discard pile having to be reshuffled and hope that, especially toward the later end of the game, when you have just an remarkable amount of cards, that hopefully you'll see those cards and the culture cards. So those 5 cards are tribe cards. You'll have a display of 8 cards down below. There's 2 eras, 2 decks of those that'll come out. At the halfway point, you'll switch to the other deck. These culture cards, you're able to play 1 or more of a turn, and those also come right into your hand when you take the action to do those. There are 6 boards that you're going to be looking at, believe it or not. Your own player board, which tracks food and tools, as well as in-game scoring opportunities, also giving you a bonus for placing that there, end of round bonuses that you'll be accumulating, and so there's a lot to look at on your player board. You're also going to be looking at this megalith board, which is a little puzzle in and of itself, trying to stack them on top of each other for big point opportunities, but also getting them on the ground floor to be getting all sorts of amazing things. Additional cards, drawing cards, more food. Some of these are insane, like this one here, allowing you to bury cards and move up on this idle board. We'll talk about that in a second. How about right now? Because on this idle board, there are 2 sides to it. This is going to give you, you know how in a lot of games, every 5 resources at the end of the game's a point. Here, going up the left side of this track, every 4 resources is a point. 3 is a point, 2 is a point, 1's a point. In addition to getting additional things as you move up that track, but your destiny's in your own hands over here. You want those leftover tools and food to be worth points? Move up that track. On the right side is rewarding you for doing what you need to do in a deck building game, which is culling bad cards out of your hand. There's this little burial card that you'll be burying cards under, and obviously the lesser powerful cards you're going to want to cull to make your deck fine-tuned, a more efficient engine. This track at the end of the game, how many cards you buried is going to be worth points, and you want to go up this track earlier than your opponent, because the furthest above, and if they're on the same level, it's the one to the left who got there first gets more points. 7 or more buried cards is 15. If you're in second place, 7 or more is 10 points. So moving up those tracks not only gets you stuff immediately on the track, but also gives you endgame points as well. Then there's the main board, which we'll get to in a second. Over here is the hunting board. So there's a whole set collection mechanism where you are going to be trying to get sets of the same animal for endgame scoring points, or you can kill them by tapping them and getting these resources when the game allows you to. Then there is this entire campsite village board that's going to be laid out randomly. And by the way, I definitely recommend using the glacier tiles, because otherwise these glacier tiles just are kind of in the way, separating things. At least with these tiles, it makes it more lucrative to place a village there. And I won't get into all the rules. Again, I'm already rambling too much as it is, but just look at that. You want to get 3 of these camp tokens in a configuration like this, so then you can place a village down. And this is an area majority thing. So a village will give you 2 influence on the surrounding tiles, where a camp will only give you 1. So for instance here, this tile has 3 purple influence to orange's 2. And at the end of every round, there's an eclipse phase, they call it, where you will be getting all of the things where adjacent to an eclipse symbol. So there's an area majority thing there, set collection there, moving up tracks there, just infinite amounts of points and bonuses there. The main board is just going to be where you're going to be placing your worker. So it's like worker placement, but not quite. Normally worker placement I think of as, I go there, no one else can go there. kind of that way because anyone can go there, but the first person to go there is going to get a bonus. So if I do this action first, the next person can still do this action, but they're not going to get that bonus. And that's actually pretty cool. And everyone has a chief, a tribe leader, and they're going to give you stuff. So like Chief Tuskbreaker loves when you go hunting because he's going to give you a tool. And at the beginning of the game, these chiefs are double-sided. You can choose which side you want. Do you want 2 food when you go hunting, or do you want a tool when you go hunting? So placing those chiefs where they will benefit you most is a fantastic idea. There are just so many cards in this game, and as you can see, lots of culture cards from multiple eras, and you're not going to see them all in a single game. There's just no way. Turn order is constantly going to flip, and you'll get bonuses for that. Another unique thing in this game is whenever you would get one of these bonuses, you can always take a lesser bonus instead. So like, for example, purple here was out of monolith tokens. They didn't want this. So instead of getting a monolith action, they could take anything else. And then there's a rest action you can take, kind of a pass, but you still get to do some stuff. And that's where I recommend using the pass rest tiles, because the first person to rest will get the reward on that tile. So that's just another thing. There's so much stuff here, folks, but it's all fun. That's my key. Is it fun to actually take actions in this game? Absolutely. There are very few meh turns in Endless Winter. All right, folks, thank you, and let's get back to the rest of the list. All right, and it hasn't been long since we've said his name, but here is another title from Vladimir Suchy. And I should also mention the co-designers of these. So Raul Aparicio, and Ross Arnold was Woodcraft, but Messina 1347. Now this was another technically 2021 release that we just did not see here in the United States until 22. This game I was looking so forward to this game because this was Suchy's game after Praga, and after Praga I was just absolutely in love. So then when I heard this was the next title, and this game was set with the Black Plague, the Black Death theme. Oh my gosh, I was instantly hooked. Now, there is not necessarily another action wheel in this one, but there is definitely some wheels. Let's take a look at Messina, my number 2 game of 2022. All right, folks, here it is, Messina 1347, one of my absolute favorite designs from Vladimir Suchy. Officially a 21 release, however, those of us in the United States weren't able to get our hands on it very easily until 22. So that's why it's made my 22 list, because I didn't get it until maybe midway through 22. But this game, folks, is fantastic for a number of reasons. First of all, the theme, the Black Plague. You're going to notice these plague rat tokens. You don't want those for sure. There are these plague cubes infesting the city of Messina. There are going to be citizen tiles. In a given round, what you're going to do after you have littered the city with plague using this wheel, it'll tell you which spots to add plague cubes to, which spots to add the citizens to, nuns, carpenters, and aristocrats. And once you have done that at the beginning of a round, everyone's going to be laying down. You will pick one of your lieutenants, and you'll move them to a space. Now, the first space you move them to is free. Every additional space beyond that is going to cost you a gold per space. But once you get there, there's a number of things you're going to do. First, if you move to a space with a plague cube, you may or may not fight the plague. You need fire tokens in order to fight the plague in that space, and that is going to earn you reputation with the townsfolk. In addition, if there are any citizens there, you are going to rescue them. In fact, that happens first. Why? Because if a citizen was in a spot with a plague cube, they have to go into quarantine first before they can populate your estate. Now, if they came from a space that was not infected by plague, they could be put right into your estate. And this player board, folks, is what makes the game so much fun, because of all of these options. Wherever you put the citizens, they are going to perform actions for you as you move these designated tokens along their routes. But if they have to go to quarantine first, you can upgrade these quarantine cabins to have them actually produce things for you as they make their way, as they get healthier and make their way through quarantine. And then eventually they can pop into the estate with the rest of the folks. But you can also build workshops, and workshops are going to give you immediate bonuses, or they'll also produce things for you at the end of each round. And as you can see, some of these citizens are upgraded, so they'll be able to give you more things when they produce, potentially. But that's a big part of the game, is moving around, doing the action. So we haven't even talked about that yet. After you have rescued the citizen, fought or did not fight the plague, and if you don't fight the plague, that's how you end up with these rat tokens, which will be negative points at the end of the game. After you've rescued the citizen, fought or did not fight the plague, then you can do an action on the tile. So for example, get a gold and a fire token, get a wood and a gold, because these workshops are going to have a cost, typically in wood and gold, quarantine cabins, wood and gold, and then these wagons, which allow you to repopulate the city. You've rescued all these citizens. Eventually you're going to actually take those citizens and put them back in the city, and those repopulation opportunities are what are going to give you a big chunk of your endgame scoring points. But it's a lot of my favorite mechanisms: worker placement, gathering resources, cashing in those resources to build things that are going to produce for you or give you one-time bonuses, but also this idea of filling your estate, which is what your player board's called, with all of these people so that you can get additional bonus actions and really chain things together, which is something I love to do. And you also have some end game scoring tracks. So, and I apologize for the glare, but we have, for example, points based on the number of workshops and quarantine cabin upgrades you've done. Boats, so there's these ships dock here with plague cubes on them. You can actually move there, fight the plague there, and collect. It's a set collection mechanism. It'll give you some bonus, but also the number of ships you have at the end of the game are going to give you points potentially, and then also points for how many times you repopulated the city. I could go on and on. It is a lot of fun, a great player aid for both what you do on your turn, how those citizens move on the estate board, which is very interesting. You have to kind of decide which way these tokens move, and you'll be able to activate citizens that you've placed in those areas. And then also all of the stuff that you do to refresh each round. And a whole bunch of other tracks. We didn't even talk about these tracks. These tracks give you all sorts of additional things. You only start with 3 lieutenants at the beginning of the game, and in a lot of games like this, obviously, unlocking more workers is going to be a fantastic thing to do. But Messina 1347, an absolute winner for me, and that's why it is in my top 10 games of 2022. All right. We're here. Number 1, my favorite game of 2022. This is more than likely top 10 of all time for me, Tiletum. I go on and on. I go a little bit crazy in the actual review clip that you're about to see for this. Suffice to say, I love everything about this game. This game takes all the things that I love about board gaming and puts it in a box. If a game was personified as me, I don't know how to say it. This is me as a board game, essentially. Oh my gosh. Even the graphic design, people say beige Euros. Oh my gosh, this game just looks and oozes chaining combos constantly. Oh my gosh, it is such a fantastic game. I go on and on enough, but I could never go on enough about how fantastic this game actually is. My favorite T game by a mile. One of my favorite games of all time. My number 1 game of 2022 It's instantly made its way into my top 10 of all time, more than likely. It's right up there with Praga and CO2 and all my other super favorite games. That is Tiletum. Let's take a closer look. All right, folks, and here we are with Tiletum, my number one game of 2022. Every time I play this, I say, was that the best that I could have ever dreamed of? Is that the best I could do? I feel like every game I play is better than the last in terms of performance, but every time I keep squeaking out somehow more combos. Some people are going to call this a beige Euro, and they are absolutely correct for the most part. And I love every beige bit of it. My gosh, I got to tell you, I'm looking at this map. Some are going to say it looks dull. I am looking at it and I think it looks gorgeous. There are so many possibilities here. Tiletum, oh my gosh, where do I begin? Here we go with the action selection wheel. Praga, I love Praga. Woodcraft, as you now know, I love Woodcraft. And now Tiletum with this action selection wheel. How does this work? Well, on a given turn, you are going to choose one of the dice that are around this wheel. The die color is going to tell you what kind of resource you're going to be getting, and the pips are how many. This would be 3 wool or 3 iron, for example. Wherever the die is on the wheel, you're going to take that corresponding action. So for example, these dice are on an architect's action. An architect's action means you're going to be able to move your architect, and the point value on the wheel is going to tell you how many action points you get for that. Now I absolutely love the fact that they give you these action point chips, because you are going to be chaining things together like crazy. How many times during this list have I said, is doing an action fun? And if so, it's going to shoot up my list. Folks, I don't know if I've ever had a boring turn during this game, because not only are you going to be getting resources, getting to do actions, there's potentially bonuses on the wheel, extra actions from things, but doing these actions is going to move you around and potentially get additional bonus actions. It's bonus actions upon bonus actions, and that's why you need these action point chips, because if I have 4 architect actions and I am moving around Tiletum, if not Europe in general, because we have Tiletum as a specific location there. But if my architect uses one architect action to move a space and then uses another action point to take a tile, that could have something else. In fact, that tile gives me 2 more architect actions. But who knows? It could give me all sorts of different potential actions that I will interrupt my current turn to then do those actions. So again, it's super important to have those, because you're going to be interrupting your actions to do other actions and then come back and do other actions. There's contract fulfillment and resources and generating, exchanging resources for other resources, completing contracts. There are these citizens, these people that you're going to be populating your player board with, and they are typically going to have some bonuses of their own. So this guy gives you 2 contract action points, and you're going to be spending those to get new contracts and also exchange your resources. They give you resources, they give you movement of your architect or your merchant, because there are going to be fairs. This game lasts 4 rounds. At the end of each round, you're going to be scoring points based on a certain criteria. That criteria could be the number of contracts you fulfilled, the number of houses, buildings that you have people in. It could be the amount of pillars that you have out in Europe, the amount of cathedrals that you have built. These pillars tell you where you can build your cathedrals, and the cathedrals, which ones are going to be in play, is going to be random every time. How much each of them cost to build is going to be random every time. Oh my goodness, folks, there is so much going on, but rarely, if ever, have I experienced a game with this many explosive turns. An explosive turn in most games is, you kind of set yourself up for that. You are accumulating resources, you're gaining benefits, gaining bonuses, building up to a turn where you cash that all in and do something explosive. In Tiletum, turn 1, the first turn of the game, you are having explosive turns. I mean, I know I'm losing my mind over this, and rightfully so. This is not only my favorite game of 2022, this is one of my favorite games of all time. I would be shocked if, when I now put all of these on my top 100 list, if this isn't top 10, if not top 5. It's right up there with Praga for me. Oh my gosh, with all of the chain reactions you do in Praga. First of all, I love the look of this game. I love the way it looks. I love the actions. I love everything you do. I love everything about Tiletum, folks. And I could keep repeating myself over and over, but I'll spare you that and say, let's wrap up my top 10 of 2022. All right, my friends, that is my top 10 games of 2022 with 5 honorable mentions, 3 other games that I own but have not yet played, but I'm sure they would probably make the list if I had played them, with a couple other games that I've played that, just weren't quite there. Overall, again, I've said it before, 2022 is one of my favorite years in gaming. I had a fantastic time hosting game nights in 22. I had a fantastic time playing newly released games from some of my favorite designers in 22. And I'm still not even caught up yet. There's so many other 22 games out there that I haven't had the honor of playing just yet. Hopefully we'll be able to change that and jump on the train for 23. 2023 is here. Let's get some more gaming experiences in. I can't wait to see what this year holds. But as always, folks, thank you all so much for watching. I do truly appreciate it. And until next time.